In this video, we're going to talk about the ingredients of a slab avalanche. And we're also going to spend just a little bit of time talking about the mechanism that drives a slab avalanche. And just to kind of remind ourselves, the reason we're concerned about slab avalanches is because this is the avalanche type that's responsible for most avalanche-related fatalities. So in this slide, there's actually all of the components necessary in order to generate an avalanche. When you look at the snowpack, there's three things you need in order to have a slab avalanche. First, you need a bed surface. So here you can see the bed surface. Bed surface is a firm layer that sits underneath the weak layer, and this is what the avalanche slides on. On top of the bed surface, we have the weak layer. The weak layer is made up of less cohesive snow, and this is where failure and propagation occur, which we'll talk more about in a moment. And on top of the weak layer, we have the slab. The slab is a layer of more cohesive snow, and this is actually what comprises the avalanche when it slides. Now, it's not enough to just have an unstable snowpack. You also need to have a sufficiently steep slope. So 38 degrees is considered prime avalanche terrain, but anything really over 30 degrees is sufficiently steep to generate an avalanche. In addition to a sufficiently steep slope, you also need a trigger. The trigger can be natural, it could be a storm, it could also be a human. So those are the five components of a slab avalanche. You need a bed surface, a weak layer, a slab, a sufficiently steep slope, and a trigger. So I'm going to play this animation. We can watch a slab avalanche occur. Now I'm going to play that again and kind of talk through what's happening. As the skier moves downhill, eventually they hit a point. At this point in the video, failure has occurred, and you'll notice that the failure occurred within the weak layer. Now I'm going to play it a little more. Notice how that failure has spread up and down the slope. This is what's called propagation. Now you'll notice these cracks around the skier. These cracks are called fractures. And avalanche. So those are the three components necessary to create a slab avalanche. You need failure, propagation, and fracture. Without those three components, you don't have an avalanche. So this slide gives us an opportunity to look a little more closely at the snowpack component of a slab avalanche. So once again, we have the bed surface, we have the weak layer sitting on top of it, and on top of the weak layer, we have the slab. So in order for an avalanche to occur, you need a failure within the weak layer that propagates and leads to fracture. So I'm going to go ahead and play this illustration. So when you're considering whether or not a failure can occur, what you're really thinking about is the pressure that I'm exerting on the snowpack sufficient to cause a failure within the weak layer? Now, we refer to that pressure that a skier exerts on the snowpack as their stress bulb. So in this case, you can see the stress bulb beneath the skier in yellow. And because of the thickness of the slab, in this case, the skier's stress bulb is not penetrating deeply enough into the snowpack to cause a failure within the weak layer. So in this case, no slab avalanche is going to occur. However, looking at this snowpack, the skier's stress bulb is penetrating deeply enough into the snowpack to impact the weak layer. So this is a scenario where you could have failure followed by propagation followed by fracture, which would allow a slab avalanche to occur. Here's another image depicting that skier's stress bulb reaching down into the snowpack as he moves downhill. Now, it's somewhat counterintuitive, but you don't actually want to ski where it's thin, and this is the reason why. If you ski where it's thin, your stress bulb is more likely to impact the weak layer. As a result, it's actually safer to ski where the snowpack is thick and you're less likely to impact that weak layer and cause a failure. This is also important to keep in mind when you're traveling uphill. A single person is not going to generate as much pressure on the snowpack as a large group that's clustered together. And this is part of the reason why we encourage people to spread out. The stress bulb is far reduced, and as a result, you're less likely to cause a failure within the weak layer. It's also worth remembering that not all user groups are going to impact the snowpack in the same way. When you think about a snow machiner, that's a lot more weight, and as a result, that's a lot more force being placed upon the snowpack. It's helpful to remember that anything deeper than 100 centimeters is probably not being impacted by a skier or a snow machiner. However, you don't know the thickness of the slab in all locations. So all it takes is finding that thin spot to generate a failure, which leads to propagation and an avalanche. It's also worth remembering that in layers that are more shallow than 100 centimeters, so closer to the surface, a snow machine does have a greater impact on those layers. Here's a quick video of a snow machiner finding that weak layer. Unfortunately, he managed to ride out of it. But it's just important to remember when you're on a snow machine, that's a lot of opportunities to find weak layers within the snowpack. And here's one last video showing that with the right snowpack setup, it doesn't necessarily require a lot of force to have a failure in the weak layer that can propagate out through the snowpack. So just to revisit the snowpack, down at the bottom is the bed surface, and the weak layer is that layer of snow that the slab slid on. And that cohesive snow on top that slid off is the slab. And the failure was occurring underneath the shovel and propagating out across. All right, that's all I have for you guys. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for listening.